Hello, thank you for coming. I'm not sure how many of you have had a chance to see the exhibition yet, but I thought I'd try and explain its premise and its thematic structure, because it's a departure for the Costume Institute to do an exhibition based around popular culture. When I began first working on the exhibition, which was about 5 years ago, my first impulse was to focus on clothing that quite literally transformed you into a superhero. So clothing that enabled you to run faster, swim faster, and even fly. But as I developed the exhibition, I became more interested in looking at the symbolic and metaphorical associations between fashion and superheroes. And on the surface, it might seem that fashion and superheroes have very little in common, but they actually share rather surprising similarities. Both are reflections of the zeitgeist, so mirrors to our social, political, and even social realities and anxieties. And at the core of both are issues of identity and transformation. Fashion and superheroes not only allow you to escape into your fantasies, but also to act out your fantasies. The idea of transforming yourself into anybody or anything. And in the world of comics and fashion, the body is everything. It can be enlarged or diminished. It can be melded with metal, merged with plant life, or morphed with animals. And it can be asexual, heterosexual, homosexual, and even hermaphroditic. The body is obsessively focused upon in both fashion and superheroes, and it's the body that provides the exhibition's organizing principle. And the show is divided into 8 bodily fantasies or narratives, and the first is the graphic body, as represented by Superman. Superman was the first character to embody the definition of the superhero, and his costume of cape, unitard, and overpants became the standard for all superheroes. It was inspired by the costumes worn by circus acrobats at the turn of the 20th century, and it combined the male fantasies of an idealized classical nudity with an affected, dandified theatricality. And Superman's costume is iconic, less because of its components and more because of its S emblem, which functions as a simplified statement of his identity. When designers reference Superman's costume, they tend to focus on its S emblem. And here, the German designer Bernhard Wilhelm has reworked the emblem to suggest the hurried handiwork of a graffitiist. And the defiled emblem was produced in collaboration with the artist Carsten Fock, who is well known for his graffiti-style artwork. Here, the Italian designer Franco Moschino has substituted the letter S for the letter M, which serves as a wry comment on the cultural currency of the branded body. Moschino's M serves the same function as Superman's S, which is really to promote brand recognition and identification. Signs and logos have come to define both comics and fashion, and they serve to ensure the body's passage into the field of the symbolic and representational. Every superhero carries a graphic symbol that expresses his or her character. Spider-Man, for instance, sports a webbed costume with a spider symbol on its front and back that serves to embody his code name. And so strongly is webbing associated with Spider-Man that even when designers employ it without any direct reference to the character, he can't help but be invoked. Here, the French designer Jean-Paul Gaultier uses mother-of-pearl buttons as well as a natural drape of silk chiffon to articulate a webbed pattern. And it's unlikely that Spider-Man's costume was a direct influence on Gaultier, but by citing a symbol so closely associated with a superhero, Gautier extends the conceptual reach of his design and deploys the graphic body for its most resonant and evocative power. In the exhibition, Wonder Woman represents the patriotic body. She was created in 1942 primarily as a symbol of American utopianism and egalitarianism. And early stories focus on her fighting fascism. This comic book cover dates from January 1943 and shows Wonder Woman bowling with the heads of Hitler, Hirohito, and Mussolini. During World War II, most superheroes were co-opted for patriotic purposes, but Wonder Woman was unique in that she quite literally wore her flag-waving fervour on her sleeves. Mobilizing the patriotic emotions attendant on her creation, she wears a red, white, and blue costume that's basically a composite of the American flag. Wonder Woman was the point of departure for John Galliano's ensemble for Christian Dior, consisting of a red and white striped jacket and bustier with gold and white stars and a pair of scanty gold briefs. It captures not only the politicized overtones, but also the sexualized overtones of Wonder Woman's costume. Captain America was also created as a super patriotic superhero, and he made his debut in 1941, a year before Wonder Woman. And like Wonder Woman, his costume is a composite of the American flag. Captain America's nationalism was asserted in his debut cover, which showed him punching Hitler in the face. While several designers in the show have co-opted the stars and stripes as an embrace of patriotic fervour, some, like Bernard Wilhelm, has used the pattern as a critique of nationalism. These two outfits form part of a collection entitled I Am the One and Only Dominator, and they were intended as a direct critique of America's expansionist foreign policy. But it should be said that superheroes, and even super patriotic superheroes like Captain America, are not above criticizing the government. In the mid-1970s, Captain America's disgust over the Watergate scandal prompted him to reject his patriotic persona and become the identity-denying nomad in an explicit critique of the military and national zealotry that tainted Old Glory. In the exhibition, the Hulk embodies the virile body and represents the bodily fantasy of male potency. In his overstated super solidity, he incarnates adolescent fantasies of physical empowerment and personifies pubescent metamorphosis. With his thick neck, bulging tendons, and throbbing veins, he suggests the turgidity of male arousal. Phallic symbolism is implicit in the representation of most superheroes, their hard bodies swathed in prophylactic unitards, but it's explicit in the case of the Hulk. And the Hulk, as a metaphor for male potency, finds many resonances in fashion, and perhaps most graphically, Walter van Beendonck created a series of jackets with air pockets that inflated to establish an immediate and exaggerated musculature. Alexander McQueen has played with a similar concept of the pneumatic physique. In this ensemble, he has relied on football shoulder pads to convey an image of sexual power. And McQueen's She-Hulk is presented in a state of vascular distension, a paradox of masculine power in feminine form. John Galliano parodies the brute force of the Hulk in this extraordinary ensemble, with its padded shoulders, fetishistic hardware, and enormous hosepipe phallus. It both reflects and represents the pulsing force of the phallic body. While the costumes worn by male superheroes can be defined by an overt sex appeal, those worn by their female counterparts border on the pornographic. Catwoman's costume is perhaps the most fetishistic of any female character. In the exhibition, Catwoman represents the paradoxical body, which reflects the alpha cat and omega kitten duality of her character. This duality is captured in the costume worn by Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in the film Batman Returns, which co-opted the traditional iconography of the dominatrix, including whip, gloves, and high heels. And in fact, Catwoman, with her black, shiny second skin catsuit, is the embodiment of Jack Lacan's post-structural phallic woman of male fantasy. The visual and symbolic language of Catwoman resonates strongly in the work of Thierry Mugler. Like the designer of Michelle Pfeiffer's costume, Mugler has raided the wardrobe of the dominatrix in his attempts to project an image of female sexuality that is liberated yet constrained. Other designers have borrowed elements from the world of fetish to evoke the radical split of conscience between good girl and bad girl that the character of Catwoman epitomizes. And here, Dolce & Gabbana make use of the harness bra, and here Mugler makes use of the corset. But what's interesting about fashion's co-option of these sexual cliches is the way it mutes their meanings and sanitizes their subtext. In much the same way as comic books, fashion presents elements of fetishistic sexuality stereotypically, undermining its subversive and sadomasochistic underpinnings. While presented blatantly, erotic energies like the feral nature of Catwoman are tamed, neutered, and ultimately domesticated. Iron Man represents the bodily fantasy of the armored body, and effectively he serves as a metaphor for defensive paranoia, for fears related to our human weaknesses, limitations, and vulnerabilities. He also acts as a metaphor for our social reality in which the distance between the body and technology is fast disappearing. And these metaphors find resonance in the work of many designers in the exhibition, including Mugler, Dolce & Gabbana, and Nicolas Ghesquière for Balenciaga. In their embrace of the spectacle of the armored body, these designers invoke a heightened, even exaggerated, awareness of the frailties of the flesh. The same is true of Batman's costume, another armored superhero who has provided inspiration for designers like Gareth Pugh. And their designs merge meat and metal, skin and chromium to create a hybrid iconography of the body, as if poised in mid-transformation between human and machine. Bodies are presented simultaneously as rigid and plastic, armored and supple. But even subsumed in impenetrable materials, the body itself is never denied. The Flash represents the aerodynamic body, which explores the bodily fantasy of power, power that violates the laws of physics, power that surpasses the physical confines of humanity. The Flash's power is superspeed, which is symbolically represented by his sleek scarlet bodysuit inscribed with a stylized lightning bolt. And this theme in the show focuses on how the gap between fictional superheroes and real-life superheroes is diminishing due to advances in clothing technology, and it comes closest to reflecting the original concept of the exhibition. This suit was developed by Nike as an aerodynamic solution to the problem of passive drag in track events. It's called the Swift suit and relies on unique seaming as well as innovative textural surfacing to decrease friction and enhance velocity. Speedo employed similar techniques to increase the speed of swimmers, and this suit is called the fast skin suit, and its surface is based on shark skin, whose dermal denticles direct the flow of water against the shark's body. The power of flight is also explored in the aerodynamic body, and this suit is designed by a company called Atair Aerospace, and it expands the concept of skydiving into sky flying. It relies on a twin turbine-powered exoskeleton that allows its wearer to reach speeds of up to 200 miles an hour. The British designer Hussein Chalayan has explored a more conceptual response to flight in his aeroplane dress. It's made out of the same material as aeroplanes, and it has side and rear flaps that are operated by remote control. For Chalayan, speed transcends the notion of movement to become a symbol and ultimately a form to be developed. As with the Flash's costume, Chalayan's poetic representation of the aerodynamic body serves as a metaphor for freedom, efficacy, and progress. In the exhibition, the character of Mystique from the X-Men represents the mutant body. Because of their grotesque physical characteristics, mutant superheroes like Mystique have come to serve as objects of prejudice, intolerance, and oppression. In the worlds of comics, they have come to stand as signifiers of subjugated minorities, whether racial, ethnic, or sexual. As a site of commotion as well as contravention, the mutant body is coincident with the fashionable body. Not unlike comic books, fashion celebrates diversity and difference. And while fashion is known to be the progenitor of idealized and even tyrannical standards of beauty, it's also known to be fiercely critical of those standards, offering radical and frequently reactive alternatives. The British designer Alexander McQueen, shown here, has gained a reputation for destabilizing normative conventions of beauty. For McQueen, the body is a place where normalcy is questioned, where the spectacle of marginality is both embraced and celebrated. The same is true for Thierry Mugler, who uses the body to transgress corporeal boundaries, to pull the body past its margins and to bring into existence new forms of creation. This is particularly evident in his chimera dress, which is shown here, which is an intensely exaggerated visualization of a body in mutation. Mugler's hybrid possesses the segmented abdomen of an amphibian, the feathered crown of a bird, the iridescent scales of a fish, and the long, wiry hair of a mammal. It's a missing link that effaces the ontological distinction between human and animal. And in its catalogue of corporeal citations, the dress transcends sex, gender, and even genetics. Like the mutant bodies of the X-Men, it challenges us to open ourselves to the beauty of difference through a liberating embrace of the unfamiliar and unorthodox. The final theme in the exhibition is the postmodern body, and it's represented by the Punisher. In the 1980s, artists and writers of comic books employed various postmodern strategies like parody and pastiche to appeal to a more adult audience and to elevate the cultural prestige of comic books. The result was a rise in popularity of grim and gritty superheroes like the Punisher, an anti-hero with a dark, cynical, even nihilistic worldview. Unlike most superheroes, the Punisher was willing to murder his enemies, a threat made explicit by the death's head inscribed on his costume. The Punisher embodied the 1980s focus on death, a focus that finds resonance in the work of Alexander McQueen. And this knitted dress, in particular, mirrors the memento mori iconography of the Punisher's costume. The Ghost Rider was another anti-hero popular in the 1980s, and his skeletal frame and flaming skull quite literally literalized the Grim Reaper characterization of the Punisher. John Galliano pays homage to the iconography of Ghost Rider in this remarkable ensemble, as does Thierry Mugler in this motorcycle bustier. Adorned with skulls, hellfire, and other symbols of mortality, it embodies the semi-logical complexity that characterizes the postmodern body of both fiction and fashion, as well as capturing the darker terrors of our contemporary world. I wanted to end with this screen print of Superman by Andy Warhol, for those of you who might find an exhibition on superheroes anathema to the museum's high art standing. But it's precisely because of their populist origins that superhero comics have provided the context and subject of high art in America. Pop art's appropriation of the style of comics made both critics and viewers reconsider the graphic vocabulary of comics as an independent art form. When Warhol co-opted the figure of Superman, he treated the image with the same irony and respect he granted other mass-produced commodities. Like his Campbell soup cans and his multiply reproduced photographs of Marilyn Monroe, Warhol's superhero imagery emphasizes that the main virtue of the superhero is an indelible and instantly recognizable iconic power. And it's really this iconic power that is a quality that is identified and exploited by the designers in the exhibition. Thank you very much.